Welcome to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, speaking to you from the borough of Queens in New York City. It is the 28th day of June, 2023. I've titled today's show, Newfound Gold, the Greatest Gold Discovery in North America. But what about Novo Resources in Australia? Novo Resources, sponsor to today's show, was a high-flying gold exploration stock back in 2017, when its shares shot up from something around 60 cents in US money to $7, actually, momentarily. It shot up that high in just a matter of weeks. But then production difficulties, I think exacerbated by things like COVID and inflation, some grade control issues and so forth, which isn't uncommon with any startup operation. Well, it sort of forced the company to put the project on care and maintenance. So to a great extent, investors have abandoned Novo Resources, but I think that might be a mistake because just last week, the company had a very exciting news release. I don't know how many people have paid attention to it, but they should, I think, because they have a joint venture agreement with De Grey Mining, which may not be a household name in America, but it certainly is in Australia. The company is, I think, outlined some 10.6 million ounces of gold, and Novo's project, called the Betcher project, is right next door. And in fact, apparently, De Grey really likes what they see there, and they struck a deal with Novo, which I think is very noteworthy because the geology, from what I understand, at Novo's Betcher is very much akin to, very much like that of the next door project that De Grey Mining has. So Mike Spreadborough, he's the executive co-chairman of Novo. He'll be with me to talk about that. And then in the second segment of today's show, Colin Cattell of Newfound Gold will be with us to tell us what his plans are, the plans of management is for that company's very significant gold discovery in Newfoundland. But right now, I am happy to tell you that Michael Spreadborough is with me to talk about Novo Resources. Novo trades in Canada under the symbol NVO. You can buy it down here in the States, as I have, under the symbol NRSPF. 269 million shares outstanding, trading at around 17 cents in US money, giving it a market cap around $46 million in US dollars. Welcome, Michael, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks very much, Jay. Pleasure to be here.
Well, your big news on June 21st, De Grey Mining, as I understand it, $25 million they need to spend over 4 years to earn a 50% interest, a 50%, so it's an even 50-50 as I understand it, on a portion of your Egina project, I believe, and they're going to also purchase some shares of Novo, put some 10 million Australian dollars into Novo's coffers as well. Do I have that right?
Yeah, very good. It is a fantastic deal for Novo shareholders. It's probably worth just doing a bit of painting at the moment, paint a picture. So De Grey, as you said, it's probably not well known in the North American markets. It's definitely starting to promote itself. De Grey is about $2 billion Australian on the Australian Stock Exchange. Within its top 20 shareholders, it actually does have a large number of US and Canadian funds. So some of your listeners may have shares through that. So $2 billion market cap. Their Mallina Gold project, which is adjacent to a lot of our tenements, now has a resource of 11.6 million ounces. Can you imagine that? 11.6 million ounces. That is just huge. They've taken 5 years to take that from small to very, very large, and they're in the middle of feasibility studies. So that's very exciting, and obviously they hope to take it into production, a 10-year, 450,000 ounce production. So they're our neighbours right next door. So on our side, at our Betcher project, we've been looking at that ground, building up the picture to the point that in September last year, we started air core drilling. Now, I appreciate air core drilling. It's not really a term known in North America, but essentially it's very rapid, fast drilling through, undercover, not hard rock, that allows us very cheaply to do a sample across the lot. So we've done 50,000 meters of air core drilling in 5 months. The results of those in geological terms have been fantastic. Very large gold anomaly has been developed. We're talking about 0.8, 0.9 grams per ton. Doesn't sound a lot, but it's about building the system and the picture. We've been very excited from late last 22, and that allowed us to do more work this year. So that really got the attention of the De Grey team. We've always believed that the same geology, the same shear structures, all of that type of stuff on the De Grey side of the tenement was what we were seeing on our side, but we're not, observant of what they're actually doing. So that got their attention, and that's allowed us to do this joint venture. So as you said, for the tenements around their ground and the Besha project, a 50% shareholding joint venture, they have to spend $25 million within 4 years to get their 50%. So, for a Nova shareholder, that's de-risking that project. Someone's going to put $25 million of their own money into that and push it along. And once they've done it, if it looks great and fantastic, we can then contribute and get 50% of the upside. But also, if we don't like it, or we don't think it's the right investment for Novo, we could dilute out and De Grey. So I think it's a really good balancing risk for a story, and it's $25 million over the next 4 years that Novo shareholders don't need to worry about. Someone's doing that, we can go focusing somewhere else, which we'll talk about later. And then as part of that, De Grey are really complementary with our exploration team. They like what we do. We've got other ground in the Pilbara, so they're investing 10 million Australian into Novo, which gives them a little bit over 11% of the shareholdings of the company at the moment. So very exciting piece of work. In Australia, it's had a lot of excitement. The geologists love what we're doing, and De Grey shareholders are happy as well. So good deal all around.
Yeah, I think we've seen the news releases from Novo with the air core drilling, and I think I saw something 5 grams over a few meters or something, which is nice, but not spectacular. But I think what people don't realize is that I think it was Quentin Henning that described air core drilling as sort of a glorified soil sampling technique. Essentially, as you said, it's not into the bedrock. I guess what you're trying to do is determine where to put the drills, the diamond drills down, or the whatever, right? It's an early exploration technique that worked well, as I understand it, for De Grey.
Yeah, definitely. And that's exactly right. We drill a little bit in the bedrock, which allows us to get the bedrock and do some geochemistry. And we've been able to compare that geochemistry with what De Grey has seen, but we've also been able to compare our early drilling with some of the results they put out. And they saw exactly the same behavior that we did. We need to remember that, De Grey is a big system with an average grade of 1.5. So if you look at some of their pits and their sections in their presentations, you'll definitely see areas at 0.2, 0.5, but overall you'll see stuff over 2, so the pit comes out at 1.5. We're seeing the same type of patterns and systems at an early stage, even though the holes we've drilled haven't been very deep. And you kind of continue the story because one of the things, I won't get this in US language, but we drilled centers at 640 meters apart. Not sure what that is in yards. And we've been drilling at 320 meter centers. So as we get closer and closer, we get a bit better indication of where we start spending some real money and drill deeper holes. And as you can imagine, 320 meter line spacings, you could hide a couple million ounces in a pit between there. So that's the work we've been doing, really starting to target. Now, at the end of this month, end of June, in a couple of days, De Grey will take over management, and we've got us and all the shareholders of Novo got the benefit of De Grey's expertise moving forwards.
Right, and I think they're required to spend something like $7 million in the first year or so. So it's not like back-ended. They have to spend. They'll start spending, and they'll start some work fairly quickly, right? And we might actually see some assays before the end of this year. Is that possible?
Definitely, you'll see continual news flow, and yes, they have to do an accelerated program, $7 million minimum over 18 months. So that's good for all of us.
I believe this is an intrusive type of system, right? And those followers in my newsletter know very well. Snowline gold is an intrusive system, and the nature of the distribution of mineralization, as you said, fairly quickly can pile up some ounces, because it's not like you have to do an intense amount of drilling to prove up ounces as you do in some in some type of systems, right?
Yeah, correct. It's a very different, you'll end up building a resource case probably on 40 by 40 metre spacing will be sufficient to get that distribution of the disseminated gold in those type of system, as opposed to, you're going to talk to Colin later. He's got a very high grade, narrow thing. He's got to do lots of drilling. This is a very different system that allows us to drill 40 metres. As I said, 40 metre spacing will give us enough information for a resource.
Yeah, that's quite a difference. Colin Cattell's newfound gold requires a lot of very intense drilling. But so I want to ask you in terms of DeGraw, do they have the skills, the management, the talent that's required to push this thing along and into production themselves?
Yeah, they've been very successful, as I said, over the last 4 to 5 years to build that. So through that, they now have a very large geological team and they've got the expertise. So we're very comfortable with the work that they will take over. Given that they've been kind of in that area for such a long time, they actually understand the geology a little bit more than us. We were starting to build that picture, but they're kind of 4 years ahead of us. So they will bring that knowledge into pushing along this discovery, which is good.
Yeah.
But having said that, if you look at their releases, they were not only excited by the rocks, but they were very, very excited with what the Novo exploration team had done to get this far.
All right, I'd like to, if you don't mind, switch gears and ask you a little bit about the Nullaghan project, which is, as I understand it, on care and maintenance. What are your plans there now, and what are you doing with regard to that project?
Yeah, so as you talked about at the start, unfortunately, about September last year, we took Nullaghan into care and maintenance. The Beatons Creek resource still sits around 250, 300,000 ounces, and we'll have a resource update in early part of the second half of this year. But our work to date has shown that we can't bring that into production economically. It still requires approvals, but economically at the moment, the mining case and the mining costs are too high. So we do sit in care and maintenance, but we're going to take, as we put in our release, a bit of time at the moment to really think, how does Nullaghan fit into the new future for Novo? Care and maintenance is very expensive. It's a very good asset base in terms of the processing plant and the camp, and we just really need to make sure that over the next 2 to 3 years, do we want to keep that asset or do we want to develop it in terms of where Novo is at the moment? Given that we've had so much success with exploration, are we better off keeping our focus on exploration at the moment, given the very high costs of keeping those quality assets in a good condition? There's no point in having a 1.5 million tonne processing plant if you're not looking after it and it deteriorates, or a mining camps or whatever else. And that is a cost burden. And we really, over the next 3-4 months, will really understand whether it is worth us continuing owning that asset, or we just really focus on the exploration and what's the best value for shareholders.
Yeah,
and behind that scenes, we obviously, gold price is a bit fickle, as you said at the moment. Before, mining costs in Australia are extremely high. Labour is hard to get, and restart costs are very, very high. So we've got to weigh all of these things up versus, are we better off deploying shareholders' money into exploration where there's a better leverage on share price growth than maybe being in production?
Well, as you and I were talking before we started recording, the gold price is about as low relative to the S&P 500, stock market in the U.S. anyway, as it's ever been. The only time it was lower relative to stocks was in the early 2000s when gold was trading at $250, and the gold shares are about as low as they've ever been relative to the gold price. So I have to ask you this, Mike, what would it take in terms of higher gold prices to make the Nullaghan project viable again? Do we have to see
I think the real answer is
3,000? What do we have to see?
Yeah, I think the real answer is, whilst it would be nice to see upside in gold price, we need to really see if there's an opportunity for us to come up with a different development pathway to pull down the mining costs. With the mining costs of Beatons Creek is very high given the nature of the ore body. So that's the challenge that's really hard to address. It's a good resource in a different style of mineralisation that would make a lot of money, but at the moment we're struggling even with all of our smarts, to make it successful. as we all know, the material treats very well in the processing plant. So it's not a metallurgical or processing issue. It's purely a mining issue on how you get that cost base. So we'll get the resource update early part of second half. We'll have another look and we'll put that into our thinking of where we go. And you're right, you know, particularly in Australia at the moment, junior producers are not getting recognised on the stock exchange.
Right.
Definitely junior explorers who are successful are seeing good price leverages. Explorers who build up resources base and able to sell them are seeing some you know, upside. But junior producers are considered very high risk under this inflationary environment at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know, interestingly enough, a lot of times gold miners do best during a deflation or disinflationary environment when the costs are declining and the gold price is high relative to the cost. But that's not, you know, with gold so low right now, it's not making up for the inflation. So it's a challenge, but you have to keep moving forward, and you certainly seem to be doing that with your Becher project, Mike. And one other thing I wanted to ask you about, there was quite a bit of talk a little while ago, maybe several months ago, about battery metals at Novo. What is there something going on there with the sort of base metals that fit into you know, electrification?
Yeah, so a good question. So 12 months ago, we made the decision to ask the exploration team to have a good look across our tenements for things other than gold. So two things popped up. One is lithium, which we have south of the Nullagine project. And we did a joint venture in December last year with another group called Litam. So they're spending $4 million to do exploration there as part of a farm-in. So we still have exposure to that lithium, and you know, we saw it as a good way for someone who's a lithium expert to do work, and again, we de-risk. And then likewise for nickel, particularly on the west coast of our tenements, there are some very nice tenements that have got nickel you know, prospects. We did enough work in later part of last year. We drilled some holes, picked up some sniffs, did some geophysics that looked exciting. So likewise, we're out in the marketplace seeing if there are other people that would like to develop or explore in those nickel assets. They're not ready for kind of development, but definitely ready for major exploration. So again, that allows us to keep our focus on gold in the right areas. People need to realise owning tenements is very expensive. So unless they're going to bring money to the shareholders, we're better off finding someone else who fits their strategy, and you know, we all win that way.
Yeah, that sounds good. I don't know if there's anything else, but anything else you'd like to add? Those are the questions that I had in mind. Anything else you'd like to emphasize, or just?
I think, yeah. While we're on the exploration, you know, don't forget we've got a large tenement base in the Pilbara. So whilst we've been talking about Becher, people over coming months will see us talk about our drilling program at Nunnery, which is south of Becher. So that's a beautiful 1.2 kilometre long soil and rock chip anomaly that's very high grade. You'll see us continue to explore our other tenements to see the potential. And don't forget Victoria. You know, this is one of Quentin's great places. You know, we now call it Belltopper. It's 50 kilometres south of Fosterville. And you'll see us later this year go drilling there. And I really like Belltopper. The guys have done a great job in building a good geological model, and we'll go drilling there. So Novo's got a pretty good news flow and drilling program for the rest of the year. So just keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I think that project you just mentioned, Quentin Henning was comparing it to Fosterville in some ways, the geology, an orogenic system. So yeah, you have a lot going on, Mike, and I think you know, at some point, people are going to say, well, wait a minute, Novo's waking up again. And it looks like people should maybe keep an eye on your company.
I'd say people, you know, like Nullagine was, as you said at the start, a bit of a disappointment. Look, please put that aside. You know, since we've moved on middle of last year and the focus on exploration, there is a new Novo, if there's such a thing, and a very quality focus on bringing shareholder value. So keep an eye as we move forwards, and we're making some pretty good progress across exploration. Not too many companies in this stage could sit there with De Grey and not only pull $10 million of value within the you know, head company, but the value that we have $25 million for Becher. So you can almost argue on paper it's almost a $50 million investment for Becher, which is not bad for 6 months work. So I
Well,
think it's a good turnaround. Yeah,
in addition to the money that they'll be spending and putting in your coffers, they also bring the intelligence of what they've learned with
correct.
some kind of deposit. Well, we can't call it a deposit yet, I guess, until it's drilled, but same kind of geology. So that's worth a lot as well, an intrinsic value, if you will.
It's very huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Michael. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us. This is a really good story that people should start paying attention to, and that's why I wanted to have you on to let people know that things are actually happening that could be worth a lot. So thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks very much, Joe.
You bet.